The wrong-door evening air was warm in Mumbai as Sundar Pichai stepped out of the car, adjusting his simple gray suit. His mind was racing because he hadn't been back to India for years, and this wedding was important. It was his cousin's big day, and Sundar, who had kept a low profile despite his success, wanted to quietly join, bless the couple, and leave without much attention. He looked at the hotel entrance, where shimmering lights glowed and music floated out. He could already feel the faint nervousness in his stomach. He had always felt a little shy in big gatherings, even though people assumed he was completely confident. When he walked through the golden doors, the scent of marigolds and jasmine hit him instantly. Laughter and chatter mixed with a soft rhythm of drums. He followed the sign toward Banquet Hall B and soon found himself standing at the entrance to a large, decorated room filled with people. Inside, hundreds of guests, dressed in colorful saris and suits, were laughing and enjoying themselves. Sundar smiled, taking in the happy scene. He thought about his cousin's face, and the promise he made to himself to at least say a few words during the toast. But something felt slightly off. He didn't recognize anyone. Still, weddings were chaotic, and he assumed the relatives he knew were just somewhere deeper inside. So he walked in, nodded politely to a few strangers, and found a quiet corner. Then he noticed the bride. She was walking slowly toward the center stage, wearing a red lehenga so bright it hurt his eyes. For a moment, she was beautiful and graceful, but Sundar's heart skipped a beat. He had never seen her before in his life. He froze. His hands began to sweat as he watched the bride and groom stand together on the stage. He realized he didn't know the groom either. He had walked into the wrong wedding. Just then, a young boy tugged on his sleeve. "Uncle," the boy said softly, "they are calling you. You are the guest of honor. Come to the stage." Sundar blinked. The boy's eyes were wide and innocent, and a crowd was starting to turn toward him. Something inside him told him to leave immediately. But then he saw the hopeful faces looking at him as if they truly believed he belonged there. So, he smiled faintly and followed the boy toward the stage. The music got louder. Cameras started flashing, and the bride and groom were now looking at him with expectation, as if he had something to say. He cleared his throat, feeling completely unprepared. Just then, a woman in the front row whispered loudly, "He has arrived. Finally, we waited for you. Everything can begin now." And in that moment, Sundar realized that walking out of this situation would be much harder than he thought. His heart pounded, and for the first time in years, he felt fear and a strange kind of curiosity creep up his spine. Stepped closer and whispered something that made Sundar's knees weaken. "We need your help. Please don't say no. Everything depends on you tonight." Sundar looked into the groom's eyes and saw something that sent chills down his back. There was a quiet desperation there, as if this wasn't just a wedding at all, but something much bigger. And before he could reply, the lights suddenly went out, and the room was plunged into darkness. A single scream rang out, slicing through the silence. Then a voice, calm and cold, spoke from the shadows. "You should not have come here." The mysterious voice. Darkness settled over the room like a heavy curtain, swallowing the lights, the colors, and even the warmth of the moment. Sundar stood on the stage, feeling the sudden shift in the air. People around him were murmuring, their voices sharp with confusion and fear. The bride clutched the groom's arm, her bangles jingling faintly in the silence. And someone knocked over a glass that rolled noisily across the floor before shattering. In that silence, Sundar's thoughts ran wild. He didn't know if he should step down from the stage or stay where he was. In America, when something went wrong, he always had a plan, a backup, a team. But here he was, standing alone in a strange wedding full of strangers who somehow believed he belonged. And now someone had spoken from the shadows, someone whose cold, deliberate tone made his skin prickle. The voice repeated itself, louder. This time, each word dragging itself across the room like a blade on stone. "You should not have come here." Gasps rose from the guests. Sundar squinted through the blackness, trying to find the source. The string lights overhead flickered weakly once, then died again. His mind raced to explain what was happening. A prank, an accident, a jealous ex-lover. He had no idea. Then a dim emergency light at the back of the hall buzzed to life, casting the room in a sickly yellow glow. And in that light, Sundar saw something that stopped his breath. In the corner stood a tall figure, completely still, wrapped in a dark shawl that covered most of their face. Sundar couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, but their eyes glowed, faintly, reflecting the dim light like two chips of glass. They weren't just watching him, they were studying him, as if he were some kind of puzzle they had already begun to solve. He felt his chest tighten. The groom stepped closer. So close Sundar could smell the faint scent of sandalwood on him. His voice shook, but his words came quickly, almost pleading. "Please don't move, don't speak. Just listen to me," the groom said, eyes darting nervously to the shadowed figure. "If you want everyone here to walk out alive, you will do exactly as I say." Sundar froze, confused and terrified. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry. What is happening?" He finally managed to whisper. The groom's hands trembled as he placed a small slip of paper into Sundar's palm, curling Sundar's fingers around it. "There's no time to explain," he murmured. "You're already part of this now. They've seen you. They know you're here. And now, they won't let you go until you give them what they came for." The words made no sense. Sundar opened the note, but it was too dark to read. Before he could say anything more, the figure in the corner began walking toward the stage. Slowly, deliberately, the sound of their footsteps was unnaturally loud in the tense silence. The crowd parted for them as if moved by an invisible hand, and every head turned downward in fear. The figure stopped just a few feet away from Sundar and lowered the hood slightly, revealing a face lined with scars and a pair of eyes that seemed to burn right through him. "You," the figure hissed softly. "I warned them not to bring you here, but they never listen. You don't know what you've walked into, do you?" Sundar's legs felt weak. He tried to speak again, but couldn't find the words. "Answer me," the figure demanded, voice rising. "Do you know who I am?" Sundar shook his head weakly. The figure let out a low laugh, sharp and humorless. "Then it's worse than I thought," they said. "You've brought it with you, and now we all pay." With that, the figure turned on their heel, and the lights flickered back on. The crowd began to murmur again, and people exchanged uneasy glances as though nothing had happened, as if this strange moment were just part of the ceremony. But Sundar could feel the shift. Something had changed, something deep and invisible. He opened his hand and finally looked at the note. The words were written in hurried, messy letters. "Don't trust anyone. Find the door behind the altar. It's your only chance." His fingers clenched around the paper as the groom leaned close and whispered once more. "You must decide now. Stay here, and you will regret it. Or follow the note, and pray you're strong enough to face what comes next." Sundar's pulse throbbed in his ears as he looked toward the stage. He saw the altar where flowers had been carefully arranged, and behind it, the faint outline of a door just barely hidden by the decorations. He thought of his family waiting for him at the real wedding, of the quiet life he had built, of the respect he had worked so hard to earn. But something in the room, something ancient, angry, and sad, was pulling him deeper. His feet began to move toward the altar before he even realized he'd made a choice. And just as he reached the flowers and touched the door handle, a single sharp cry cut through the air, this time from the bride herself. Sundar spun around to see her pointing at him, her face pale with terror. "Don't open it," she screamed. "If you open that door, you'll never come back." He froze, torn between the note in his hand and the fear in her voice. The room fell silent again, and everyone stared at him. The figure in the shawl was gone. The groom was gone. Even the boy who'd led him here seemed to have vanished into the crowd. He stood alone at the altar, hand on the door, heart racing so fast it felt like it might burst. And then, slowly, almost gently, the door began to open on its own, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. Something inside that darkness whispered his name soon. The door beyond the altered door creaked open slowly, as though it had been waiting for him all along. Sundar's breath caught in his throat. Beyond the frame, there was no hallway, no back room, no emergency exit, only a vast darkness that seemed alive, shifting and humming like a great sleeping beast. The whisper came again, softer now, but closer. Soon, he stared into the blackness, his pulse hammering in his ears, his fingers still gripping the note that had led him here. The words on it blurred in his sweaty palm. "Don't trust anyone. Find the door behind the altar. It's your only chance." Behind him, the bride's voice cracked with fear. "Don't go through it," she called out again, but this time her tone was softer, pleading rather than commanding. "Please, don't leave us here alone." Her words pierced him more deeply than he expected. He turned his head to glance at her, and in that instant, he saw the tears streaming down her cheeks, her hands trembling as she clutched the groom's arm. She looked as though she wanted to rush forward and stop him, but something, maybe fear, maybe guilt, kept her rooted to the spot. For a moment, Sundar hesitated. The strange figure in the shawl was gone. The groom had vanished. The boy who'd let him in was nowhere to be seen. The crowd behind him had gone silent, their faces downcast, as if they already knew what choice he was going to make. He thought of the quiet, orderly life he had worked so hard to build, the humble beginnings, the long hours, the quiet nights alone in his office, wondering if it was all worth it. He thought of his mother's words when he left India the first time: "No matter where you go, remember who you are." But right now, he didn't know who he was anymore. Here, in this strange room with its strange shadows and stranger rules, all he knew was that he could not stand still. He stepped through the door. At first it was like falling into cold water. The darkness swallowed him whole, and he instinctively reached out to steady himself, but there was nothing to grab onto. No walls, no floor, just endless black. Then the door behind him slammed shut with a deafening finality, and he was alone. At least he thought he was alone. Slowly, the darkness began to change. Faint shapes emerged around him, faint glimmers of light, like stars caught under a thick fog. His feet found ground, soft, spongy, almost like earth, and he took a cautious step forward. The air smelled faintly of smoke and rain. Dot in the distance he could see a faint glow, flickering like a dying flame. Dot. As he walked toward it, he began to hear whispers, low and indistinct at first, but growing louder as he went. They didn't seem to come from any one place. They came from everywhere, from the ground under his feet, from the shadows just beyond his vision, even from inside his own mind. Why did you come here? You don't belong here. Turn back before it's too late. He forced himself to keep walking, his jaw clenched tight. Finally he reached the glow and realized it came from a strange lantern set atop a wooden post. The flame inside the glass flickered between blue and gold, casting long, eerie shadows. Next to the lantern was another door, smaller this time, made of dark wood with an intricate pattern carved into it. He reached out to touch the handle, when he heard a sudden sharp noise behind him, the sound of something heavy being dragged across the ground. He spun around, his heart in his throat just beyond the lantern's light. He could see something moving in the dark. It was tall and thin, its limbs bending in ways that didn't look quite human. Its eyes glowed faintly, just like the figure in the shawl back in the hall. The whispers rose in a chaotic chorus, filling his head until he could barely think. Leave. Leave now. It's too late for you. He pressed his back against the door, his breath coming fast and shallow. The figure moved closer, each step deliberate, as if it was savoring the moment. Then it spoke, and this time the voice was louder, clearer, and terrifyingly familiar. You've already made your choice, Sundar, and now you belong to us. He felt the door behind him shudder, as though something on the other side was trying to get out. The handle grew warm under his hand, then hot, until he almost let go. But before he could decide whether to open it or run, the figure lunged forward with a speed that took his breath away, and in the blink of an eye, it was right in front of him, its face mere inches from his. Dot. He froze. Its eyes bored into his, and in those eyes he saw something that made his stomach turn. Not anger, not malice, but sadness. Deep, endless sadness. The creature raised a hand, long fingers hovering near his face, and in a whisper that was almost a sigh, it said one final thing before everything went dark again. You should never have opened the first door. The darkness swallowed him whole once more. When Sundar woke, he was lying in a field of tall grass, the stars above him cold and unfamiliar. The door was gone, the lantern was gone, and in the distance, he could just barely see a figure standing on a hill, waiting. He sat up slowly, his body trembling, and heard the same whisper on the wind, carried to him as if from far away. You're not done yet. The field of whispers grass swayed gently around him, whispering against his suit as Sundar slowly rose to his feet. The air was cool here, almost too cool, and carried the faint scent of earth and something metallic that reminded him of old coins. Above him, the sky was unlike anything he had ever seen, not black, not blue, but a deep shade of violet streaked with faint silver veins that pulsed slowly, as if alive. He stood in that strange field for a long moment, unsure of which way to go. Behind him, there was nothing but endless grass fading into darkness. Ahead, on the distant hill, the lone figure still waited, tall and still, its outline barely visible against the eerie sky. The wind picked up and carried faint voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Come closer, we've been waiting for you. Don't keep them waiting. He shivered and began walking, each step through the thick grass feeling heavier than the last. The ground beneath him was soft, yet somehow it resisted his feet, as though it didn't want him to reach the hill. He pushed forward anyway, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists. As he walked, the whispers grew louder. At first they were just indistinct murmurs, but slowly they formed words, painful words that cut into him like icy knives. You were never enough. You left them behind. All your success, but no peace. He stopped and glanced around, trying to find the source of the voices. To his horror, he realized that the whispers weren't coming from the air or the ground. They were rising from the grass itself. Every blade of grass seemed to have a tiny mouth, murmuring his failures, his regrets, his quiet moments of doubt that he thought no one else had ever seen. He forced himself to keep walking, but each step felt heavier, as if the field itself was trying to pull him down. Suddenly, he stumbled, his foot catching on something hard and cold beneath the grass. He reached down and parted the blades to see what it was, and froze. There, half buried in the earth, was a cracked mirror. His own face stared back at him, but it wasn't the face he expected. This version of him looked tired, gaunt, and hollow-eyed, with deep shadows under the eyes and a sadness in them that he couldn't look away from. Then, without warning, the reflection in the mirror smiled at him, a slow, cruel smile that sent chills down his spine. You can still turn back, the reflection whispered, but you won't, you never do. Sundar flinched and stood quickly, leaving the mirror where it lay. He kept walking, trying to ignore the whispers that only grew louder with every step. The figure on the hill grew clearer now. It wore what looked like a long robe that rippled in the strange wind, and its face was hidden under a dark hood. It stood perfectly still, watching him approach. As he neared the base of the hill, the ground changed. The grass gave way to black stones that were warm to the touch. A faint golden light glowed at the top of the hill, and the whispers fell silent, replaced by a deep, resonant hum that vibrated in his chest. He climbed slowly, the stones beneath his feet whispering now too, but this time the words were different. "You are close now. One more choice, only one." His heart pounded as he finally reached the top of the hill and stood before the figure. Up close, it was even taller than he had imagined, its presence filling the air with a quiet power that made him feel very small. The figure finally raised its head. Inside the hood was no face, only a swirling darkness with faint points of light, like a night sky trapped in human shape. "You have walked far, Sundar," it said, its voice deep and layered, as though 1,000 voices spoke at once. "You opened the first door, though you were warned. You crossed the field, though it showed you your own sorrow. Now you stand here, at the last threshold." Sundar swallowed hard, forcing himself to speak. "What do you want from me?" The figure tilted its head slightly, as if amused by the question. "It is not about what we want," it said. "It is about what you want, what you choose. The door you opened cannot be closed. But what lies ahead is yours to decide." With that, the figure stepped aside, revealing yet another door, this one much taller, made of dark wood etched with strange symbols that shimmered faintly in the golden light. "Behind this door," the figure continued, "is the truth you have been running from, the truth you did not even know you were seeking." Sundar stared at the door, his heart heavy, his mind racing. The whispers rose again behind him, this time more urgent than ever. "Don't open it. Go back. You're not ready." But there was another sound too, now faint but growing louder. The sound of footsteps climbing the hill behind him. He turned his head and saw the bride standing there, her dress torn and her face streaked with tears. "Don't do it," she begged, her voice cracking. "Please, if you open that door, you'll lose everything. There's still time. You can still walk away." He stared at her, then back at the door. The figure beside him spoke once more, quietly, almost tenderly. "You cannot walk through both doors, Sundar. You must choose. To stay in the world you know, or to step into the truth and leave it all behind." His fingers hovered near the handle. His whole body trembled, caught between the bride's desperate plea and the figure's quiet promise. Then the bride screamed a long guttural scream that pierced the stillness, and lunged forward, trying to pull him away from the door. But the door was already opening. A blinding white light poured through the crack, so bright it burned his eyes and seared his skin. He stumbled forward, and as the light swallowed him, he heard one last whisper in his ear. "You chose, and now, you cannot turn back." Everything dissolved into white dot asterisk. The white beyond H light engulfed him completely, so blinding that Sundar had to squeeze his eyes shut. Yet even with his eyes closed, the brightness was there, inside his eyelids, inside his mind, burning away everything else. It felt like falling into the heart of a star. For a few moments, or maybe forever, there was nothing else. No whispers, no wind, no sound, but the faint roar of blood in his ears. Then slowly, the light softened. He dared to open his eyes. He found himself standing in a vast expanse of white. There was no ground beneath his feet, yet somehow he didn't fall. There was no horizon, no sky above, no shadows anywhere, just an endless plain of soft white that seemed to stretch into infinity. The silence was so complete, it felt heavy, pressing on him from all sides. He took a tentative step forward, and the space beneath him rippled faintly, like water disturbed by a pebble. His breath echoed in this emptiness. After everything he had been through, the dark wedding hall, the mysterious figure, the field of whispers, this silence and stillness felt even more frightening. He called out into the emptiness, his voice cracking, "Is anyone here?" For a long time, there was no response. Then, somewhere far ahead, a faint figure appeared. So far, he could barely make it out. It was walking toward him at an unhurried pace, its shape blurry, shimmering like heat on asphalt. As it drew closer, Sundar felt a strange sensation building in his chest. Not fear exactly, but something heavier. Grief, the kind of grief he thought he had buried long ago. The figure became clearer with each step. It was a man, tall, thin, wearing a simple white shirt and trousers. His hands were clasped behind his back, and his face was calm, almost kind. Sundar felt the air catch in his lungs when he finally recognized him. It was his father. His legs nearly gave out. He hadn't seen his father in decades, not since he passed away. And yet here he was, standing right in front of him, his eyes warm but sad, his presence filling the endless white with a quiet dignity. "Appa," Sundar whispered, his voice trembling. His father tilted his head slightly, studying him with the same thoughtful look he always had when Sundar was a boy. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but carried easily through the emptiness. "You have come far," his father said, "but you do not understand yet why you are here." Tears welled in Sundar's eyes before he could stop them. I don't understand any of it," he admitted, his voice breaking. "Why did I walk through that door? What is this place? Why are you here?" His father took another slow step closer, his expression a mix of pride and sorrow. "Because you chose," he said simply. "You chose to see what lies beyond the surface of your life. You chose to face what you have always feared, and now, you must choose again. Sundar shook his head, confused, his hands trembling. Choose what? He demanded. I don't even know what's real anymore. His father gave a faint, sad smile, and gestured behind him. Sundar turned slowly to see another door, standing there in the white expanse as if it had been waiting all along. This one was unlike the others, tall, ancient, carved with delicate symbols that seemed to shift and shimmer as he stared at them. Behind this door, his father said quietly, is the truth you have been searching for since the day you left home. But there is a cost. There is always a cost. Sundar stared at the door, his heart hammering. What's behind it? He asked, though a part of him already suspected the answer. Everything you've avoided, his father replied. Everything you lost. Everything you love. And everything you fear. The words hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. Sundar turned back to his father, desperate for reassurance. If I open it, what happens to me? His father's gaze softened, but he did not answer. Instead, he reached out and placed a hand on Sundar's shoulder. That is not for me to say, he murmured, but remember this, no matter what you find, no matter how dark it may seem, there is always a way forward. And then, just like that, his father began to fade. His outline blurred, his face dissolving into the white, until there was nothing. Left Sundar stood alone again, his knees weak, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He turned back to the door. The whispers from before had returned now, faint but insistent. Open it, open it, open it. He took a hesitant step forward, his hand trembling as he reached for the handle. Then, a sudden noise shattered the silence, sharp and metallic, like chains snapping. He froze, his fingers inches from the door. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a crack form in the endless white, a jagged black line tearing through the space like broken glass. From that crack, something began to emerge. That was the figure in the shawl. But this time it was larger. Its shape no longer human at all, its eyes burning brighter than ever. Its long arms reached outward, and its voice echoed all around him, deeper and more terrifying than before. You do not belong here, it hissed. You are not ready. Step away from the door, or you will be lost forever. Sundar stood frozen between the door and the creature, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. The whispers rose into a deafening chorus, the crack in the white growing wider, the air itself trembling under the weight of what was coming. He stared at the door, he stared at the creature, and as the space around him began to collapse, he took one deep breath, closed his eyes, and made his choice. The final choice of whiteness cracked all around him now, spiderwebs of black streaking outward, as if the very fabric of the space was breaking apart. The creature in the shawl towered above him, its form too large to take in all at once, its eyes burning through the haze. Its long fingers scraped across the air, leaving behind faint trails of darkness that hung and writhed like smoke. The whispers had risen into a deafening roar, thousands of voices screaming, pleading, warning. Sundar could barely hear his own thoughts over the chaos, and yet the door still stood there before him, impossibly still, as though untouched by the destruction. Around it, the strange symbols carved into its surface shimmered faintly, and through the crack in the door came a faint, rhythmic sound, a heartbeat, slow and steady. Calling him closer, the creature's voice boomed above everything else, deeper than thunder. Step away from the door, it commanded, its words shaking the ground beneath his feet. You are not ready. You have not earned what lies beyond. Turn back, and you may yet return to the world you came from. But then faint and clear, cutting through the noise, came another voice. It was his father's voice again. Don't be afraid. This is what you came for. Step through. Sundar's breath caught in his throat. He looked at the door, then at the creature, then back at the door. His whole body trembled as memories surged through him. His mother's gentle hands on his shoulders when he left for America. His first day at Google, sitting quietly in a room full of strangers. Nights spent alone, wondering if he was truly good enough. All the moments he had buried and hidden and run from now laid bare before him. He took a step toward the door. The creature let out a sound, a low, guttural growl that made the air around him vibrate. We'll be lost forever, it hissed. You will lose everything. No one will remember your name. But Sundar kept walking. His hand reached out, closing the final inches between him and the handle. It felt warm, almost alive, as if it had been waiting for him all along. He took a deep breath and turned the handle. The door swung open silently, and a wave of golden light spilled out, washing over him and pushing the creature back into the shadows. The whispers fell silent at once. Sundar stepped through. On the other side was not what he expected. He stood in a quiet street bathed in morning sunlight. The smell of chai and fresh bread filled the air. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. He knew this place, that it was his childhood street in Chennai. He looked down at himself and saw he was no longer wearing his suit, just a simple white shirt and sandals, the way he had dressed when he was a boy. He walked slowly down the street, his fingers grazing the walls of familiar houses. Everything was warm here, real in a way that felt deeper than reality itself. Ahead of him, he he saw a small boy sitting on the steps of a house, clutching a notebook in his lap. The boy looked up, and Sundar's breath caught. The boy was him. Younger, smaller, his eyes wide and full of dreams that had not yet been touched by doubt or fear. The boy smiled faintly, stood, and walked up to him. "You found it," the boy said softly, as if he had known all along that Sundar would come. Knelt down, feeling tears slip silently down his face. What is this place?" he asked. The boy tilted his head thoughtfully, then answered. "It's you," he said. "Everything you are. Everything you were afraid to see. You kept running from it, but you came back. And now," he reached up and placed a small, warm hand on Sundar's cheek. "Now you can start again." The boy slowly faded into golden light, and Sundar felt something lift inside him, a quiet heaviness he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying all these years. The world around him shifted once more.